Okay, I think we're just about ready to get going. Okay, so hello and welcome to my first online self-defense seminar. Okay, my name is James, and today I want to take you through some of the basic principles of self-defense, okay, in order to give you more knowledge and awareness to help keep you and your family safe. This is in tribute to all of the individuals and their families who have been affected by the terrorist attack in Forbury Gardens on the 20th of June in Reading. Having lived in Reading all of my life, I've never expected something like this to happen, but the reality, anything can happen at any time, and we just don't know about it. And I cannot stand doing nothing while having all of this knowledge. So today, I want to educate you and create some awareness as this important life skill. So, what is self-defense? So, self-defense is the combination of skills required to avoid, deter, and deal with a conflict, whether this be verbal or physical or both. Self-defense is your legal right to prevent injury to yourself and your friends and family while using reasonable force. Okay, so as long as reasonable force is used, you can defend yourself to your heart's content, especially if there's a group, weapons, or if it's just one-on-one. Okay, so the idea is you're allowed to defend yourself. Okay, you don't just have to stand there and take it. Okay, it's not like school where they say, oh, you're not allowed to fight against the bullies. Okay, this is real life. Okay, at the end of the day, unfortunately, it's survival of the fittest, and it will come, sometimes down to life and death. Okay, and at the end of the day, you'd be rather be the one who makes it through. So, where to begin? So I want to start off by saying that it might seem rather backwards, but fighting is not what self-defense is about. Okay, like I said, it's avoidance and deterrence as well. So this is why you need to know about these 5 elements of self-defense before you even start training. So the 5 elements are avoidance, awareness, diffusing, running, and then finally fighting. And that is in priority order as well, okay? You don't just want to jump straight into a fight. Instead, you want to try and avoid it. So avoidance is the easiest one to learn, okay? It's something you can just do straight away and you don't really need to train for, okay? You just use your common sense. So if you're not there, they can't hurt you. It's as simple as that, okay? If you know of a dodgy bar or a club, or you see a dark alley and you think, oh, that's a few minutes short of home, don't do it. Stick to the lights. Don't go out too late, Don't get completely plastered and then stumble around to the streets, okay? Stay within your limit, that kind of thing, okay? It's all about common sense. It's just about keeping yourself as safe as possible, okay? So the next one is awareness. Now, this is something that really annoys me because people go around with their hoods up, earphones in, and they're looking down at their phone and they will wander around like this and they do not realize how vulnerable they are. Okay, for one thing, you look weaker because you're hunched over. You're looking down at the ground. You look small and weak. Okay, if you've got your chest up, you're observing the world around you, walking around like you own the place. Okay, you're not as much of a target. It means you're less likely to get attacked. And that's better, obviously. Okay, but going back to awareness, okay, the main thing with that is that you need to see your surroundings. You need to see where people are. You need to see how they're acting. And you need to be aware of what obstacles and objects are around you. Okay, if you're in a pub or something along those lines, you got tables and chairs, things like that. If you get into a confrontation, you don't just only want to run headfirst into a wall or a chair or fall over it or something along those lines. Okay, that's not going to do you any good. You need to know where things are. And similarly, if you think that somebody might be following you, that's good to know as well, okay? If you're too busy on your phone or you're not looking around, you're not keeping an eye on things, I'll be walking home with the missus. It'll be late at night. We've seen our family while we're walking home. Somebody will be behind us, dark clothing, and you're thinking, is it, isn't it? But it doesn't hurt to keep an eye on them. So I will be talking to her and facing her, things like this. But in reality, at the corner of my eye, I'm watching them. I'm observing what they're doing. I'm not making it blatantly obvious and I'm not being paranoid. Okay, but little things like that, using reflections. You're walking down the high street, all of these shops and windows along the side. You're using those reflections to see who's behind you, whether they're tailing you, following you directly, you know, the good way to check this as well is crossing the road, things like that. Okay, it might go out of your way a little bit, but if they then follow you, well, you might want to either start running or take one of these other options. So moving on then, okay? So the next thing is, my one completely blank then. So next thing is diffusing, okay? Now this is something that we don't really get taught how to do, okay? How to de-escalate a situation. It seems impossible where if someone's shouting in your face, you think, how am I going to be able to manage this? But it's possible, okay? So a lot of self-defense courses don't focus on these elements, okay? They focus on the hand-to-hand combat stuff because that's fun, it's exciting, you know, it's what people expect. In reality, you know, you've got all of these steps before we even get to the fighting stuff, okay? So you want to de-escalate. You don't want to fight, okay? Nobody wins in a fight. You're going to get hurt. So diffuse it, okay? Let's say you turn around, you bump, you know, knock over somebody's drink. Oh, sorry, mate. Fair enough. I'll buy you another drink. Okay, it's a couple of quid. What? Who cares? Okay, you know, let's say you're looking around, you're using your awareness. Okay, you know, you see a bloke with his missus there, and he's like, "Oh, you looking at my missus?" Oh no, sorry, mate. I thought I knew her from school. I thought we went to school together. No, my bad. Don't worry. You know, things like that. Especially if you ask them a question, it does the whole thing of, "Oh, what are you looking at?" Okay, Bob from school, yeah. You used to go Prospect? No. You ask them a question and it will confuse them. It diverts their attention from you because now they're thinking, did I go to school with this guy? Things like that. It's a really easy way of being able to divert their attention, diffuse the situation, and then you can either go, oh, no, don't worry, and you walk away, or, you know, suddenly you've got a new best friend. Who knows? Okay? But it's a good way of just stopping any further escalation, okay? What you don't want to do is then go, oh, whatever, and start bigging yourself up like blokes normally do, that sort of thing, you know, the whole lad culture stuff, okay? Because as soon as you start arguing against each other and you start, you know, manning up on all of that, making yourself look bigger, it becomes intimidating. You know, it's like animals in the wild. They start showing their teeth, things like that. Can't make them make themselves bigger, okay? It's more threatening. As soon as you do that, they're going to make it worse, and they're going to make it worse, and it's just going to keep escalating, and you're going to keep building each other up until you clash, okay? Now, it might just be verbally and people pull you away or whatever, but you just don't know that, and you don't know their background. They might have had the worst day of their life, and then they just want to take it out, okay? You just don't know this, okay? It could be you who's had the worst day in your life, and you might make a poor judgment call, and you've got to realize this, okay? Diffuse where possible, okay? Try to make a joke out of things. Try and, you know, make them laugh, things along those lines, okay? This is easier said than done because in that situation, your heart's pumping. You know, we're not used to confrontation, especially from a stranger. If it's something we're more familiar with, then it's a bit easier. But if it's a complete stranger, we start panicking, okay? And that's what we need to practice, okay? And it's quite hard to do. So this is why it's one of the more important skills, but also it's very hard to learn, okay? And it's hard to practice this as well. But what I like to do is imagine these situations in my head and what I would say, just like what I've just done with you there. Okay, so the next thing we've covered, avoidance. So not being there, you know, not putting ourselves at risk. We've talked about awareness, being aware of our surroundings, increasing our reaction time. You know, if somebody's coming towards us, wanting to attack us, we're more aware of them quicker, so we can either run or fight if need be. And we talked about diffusing. You know, if things start kicking off, it's become a situation. We're now trying to de-escalate it, try and bring it down so we can either get away easily or, yeah, you don't have to go anywhere because problem solved. So the next options are the fact that the situation's kicking off even more. It's escalated. You have not been able to diffuse it. Something's going to happen. Okay, you have one of two options now. The most important one is running. Okay, again, avoidance. If you're not there, they can't hurt you. It's pure and simple. Okay, so if you've got the ability to run, you don't have your back up against the wall, things like that, then run. Okay, get out of there. Okay, especially if you're diffusing as well. You know, while it's escalating, it's like, look, don't want any trouble. I'm just going to leave. Okay, nice and easy. Don't turn your back to them. You know, just sort of turn to the side. You can keep your hand up, things along those lines. You're keeping your distance, okay? This is a barrier as well. This is showing you this is my limit. This is my bubble. This, you know, This is my shield. If you come within this, you're breaking through that, and that is a physical threat now. Okay, if they start pressing up against that hand, that's because they're trying to intimidate. Okay, and at that point, anything could potentially happen, and that's where you could start going into preemptive strikes and things along those lines. So, like I said, running, best option. Okay, the whole thing of, you know, men don't back down from fights and this, that, and the other, well, you've got to prove yourself, you know, prove your worth and your honor and this, that, and the other. Okay, it's not like that. As total bull. At the end of the day, nobody wins in a fight. Pure and simple. Okay, it's far better to run and survive, because, you know, not everybody survives in a fight. You know, it sounds silly, but a single punch can kill you, and it's just not worth it. And you don't know if they have a weapon. Okay, so especially those who go out seeking fights and things like that, it's just not worth it. So the last option, it's all kicking off. You don't see another possible way out, and that's where you come into that physical confrontation. Okay, your fisticuffs, that hand-to-hand combat. This is where you need those more traditional self-defense skills. Okay, it means that you need to exploit your fists, your feet. You need to get power through your leg to drive into them. You need to barge. You need to push. You need to get out of there. But as soon as you see an opening, you resort to that second to last option again, and you run. Okay, the other three have failed. You cannot go back to those. Okay, awareness is great for the whole thing, because you need to be aware if other people are coming in or what objects are around you, of course. But for the most part, those first three options, they have failed you. Okay, either you haven't trained them enough, or you're unfortunate enough to be in that situation. So you've got to use one of those last two options. Okay, you go with the fighting. As soon as you see an opening, you need to take it. Okay, so very quick drink there, otherwise I just keep going on and on. And the last thing you want is for me to ramble on and on constantly. So next thing I want to talk about is the risks of a fight, because it's all well and good, you know, you see people fighting for sport, you know, they have MMA and boxing and things along those lines, and you see there's sort of Olympic sports, you know, karate is going to be in the Olympics next when we finally get around to that, and taekwondo, things along those, wrestling, you know, there's a lot of these combat sports, and it's all very entertaining and well good, but they have rules, and these rules are there to stop people from getting hurt, or as hurt at least. Okay, yes, okay, you might occasionally have deaths, but it's very, very rare. Realistically, fights don't go like that. It look well and good because it's organized, you know, they don't want to score a point, so you avoid their attacks and you try to score a point, or it's just bludgeon each other as much as you can until one goes down. You can have your own opinions about that, but either way, that's what it is. Okay, but it's protected. And they're in a ring, they're in an area where there are no other objects. They don't have to worry about those sorts of things. Like I said before, nobody wins in a fight, and I will just keep repeating that, and I repeat that every time I do a self-defense course, because it's true. Okay, you ever seen those Jackie Chan movies? You know, he punches a guy in the face and goes, "Oh, yeah," that's because it hurts. Okay, it doesn't matter how hard you know, make your knuckles, how much, you know, hard bodybuilding you do to strengthen those bones and make them rigid. It still hurts to hit somebody. It's bone against bone. It's going to hurt you. It might hurt them more than you, ideal, but it's still going to hurt, okay? You know, and realistically, you know, they're going to get hit in as well. Fists will be flying. People will be grabbing, clawing, you know, pushing. You're going to get hurt. They're going to get hurt. You know, there is no winner in a fight. It's pure and simple, okay? Nobody comes out on top. You might be the last person standing, they might be on the ground, but you're still going to be hurt. You're still going to have a bloody nose. You know, you're still going to have scratches, you're still going to be bleeding, potentially broken bones, fingers, things along those lines. You know, you imagine all these wrestling around, throwing people down to the ground and whatnot. Fingers are fragile. You're more likely to break one of those. And anything can happen. You can sprain, you know, there's so much possibility. You know, fights are unpredictable. And this is the problem with things like Hollywood, because it's this big misinterpretation of what combat really is. Realistically, you know, you're not going to be able to stand there like Neo doing all of this sort of thing, one hand behind his back, and you're blocking, you know, and you can do that all day, or you can move around and fight all these different people all at once, and you're not touched at all, and they look epic and it's awesome. But that's complete fiction. That does not happen. Okay, yeah, okay, maybe you might be able to fend off a few people, but you're still going to get hit. You're still going to get hurt. It's not as easy as they make it look, okay? And you won't come out unscathed. Fights are unpredictable. You don't know what's going to happen. And like I said before, a single punch can kill you. It's been in the news. You can look up the reports. People have gone into an argument outside of clubs or whatever. One person's just turned around, whack. They've done a swinging punch, knocked a guy clean out. He's fallen back, slammed his head onto the path, onto the curb, and it's killed him basically instantly. There's lots of stories like that, or they've just hit them in such a way that it's caused them, enough brain damage to either, severely concuss them, put them in comas, or even kill them. And that's just from one punch. So you must understand that every time you throw a punch, it could kill somebody. And you have to understand as well that every time somebody throws a punch at you, it could kill you. Don't take it lightly. Okay? Fighting is just not the way, okay? But unfortunately, humans, I think 2020 kind of proves, we have a history of violence. And unfortunately, it's something that we cannot avoid. It is almost in our nature, okay? There will be conflict. We will have disagreements, of beliefs and religion and everything, really. Okay. If there's a subject, we can argue about it, basically. You can even go down the lines of, opinions and facts. People will argue something's an opinion when it's a fact, and vice versa. It's, it doesn't matter. We will argue no matter what. So we need to realize that actually it's not worth fighting. We need to talk more, okay? And this is where the diffusing comes in. But realistically, we don't want to fight. You don't want to do it. I mean, who wants to fight and come out hurt? Okay, as a sport, they're agreeing to that. That's up to them. It's in a safe scenario. And, it is fun to be able to, try and cash somebody out and cause a little bit of damage. I mean, I'm, sadistic as it comes, really. I enjoy the idea of manipulating somebody and putting them in the holes and start putting pressure into the joints, or, they're at my mercy sort of thing. I'm overpowering them. I can take them to the ground, or, I'm making sure I'm hitting pads hard. Things along those lines. It's fun, okay? People do enjoy that, and there's not a problem with that. But it's when you go out on the street and you start doing that sort of thing. We just can't do that. It's just not worth it. And the thing is, it's easy to go into grievous bodily harm as well. And this is where I want to start talking about the legality of everything, okay? There's a whole legal system, that's, put towards these sort of conflicts. And it's quite common, actually, that even martial artists, they've trained for years and whatnot, a situation kicks off and take it down, they start breaking bones and things like that, and it goes into GBH. No longer is it self-defense, but instead it's reverse, and you become the attacker instead. And that's something that you have to look out for, okay? And this is why you want to try and back away from fights, because again, if you accidentally go too far, it can come back on you. Now, it's unlikely if you keep controlled, if you take them down and then run, as I believe that, if you're finding that opportunity to get away, then once it's there and you go and you make it out and they're not putting up a struggle, you take it, you're fine, okay? You're in the clear. But if they're keeping hold of you, you can't quite escape, they're grabbing you, holding on, or pulling out weapons, and you just keep hitting them, you're breaking bones, whatever, it doesn't matter, okay? That's absolutely fine, okay? The legal system will support you. And this is where we come back to reasonable force, okay? If somebody's calling you names and you snap their neck or something daft, that's not reasonable force, okay? Reasonable force is all about using the minimal force necessary to be able to get out of that situation. So exactly what I was just talking about. You can take them to the ground, you can throw a few punches until they're sort of backing away, and then you run. They're down here, they're trying to defend themselves, they're carrying away. That's your opportunity. Yeah, okay, maybe you could kick the knee in, you know, make sure they buckle down so they're right on the floor, and then you push them with another leg, make sure they're on the floor. That's what I personally do, because at the end of the day, when they're on the floor, it takes them a lot longer to get back up and chase you. Whereas if they, you know, you give them time to recover here, they might suddenly pull out, you know, and grab or pull out a weapon, something along those lines. Okay, you don't want that. So as long as you're using reasonable force, you're fine. Okay, for in the same way, you know, if somebody pulls out a knife on you and you start breaking bones, that's reasonable. Okay, they have a deadly weapon. They have an intent to kill, potentially. Okay, it is there for a reason. If they did not want to use it, they would not have it. That is basically it. Okay, so reasonable force. As soon as they start giving in, make sure they either go down to the floor or create some distance from yourself without causing them too much injury. So things like a thrust kick or a push, good way of creating distance easily or taking them to the ground without causing significant harm. Okay, whereas, you know, if you've got them and you start gouging eyes and things like that, that's quite violent. Obviously, you know, if you're causing permanent damage to people, that's not going to be looked on as fondly. You know, breaking bones can heal. They won't ever be the same again, but you can still, you know, argue your point with that. You know, let's say they have a knife and you start, you know, you push the elbow back, you break it, you know, okay, they've let go of the knife. That was the intent. They're definitely not going to want to do that again. But, you know, let's say they just pushed you and you start gouging eyes, they're now blind for the rest of their life. That's not reasonable force. Okay, so you have to think about these things in advance. You know, what you would do in what situations, how far you're wanting to go, and it's also self-control. You know, don't go into the whole idea of revenge. Okay, just because they hit you once doesn't mean you need to hit them back 10 times, you know, and 10 times harder. You know, they might have started it, you know, they might have insulted you. Don't get emotional about it. Okay, the last thing you want is to be emotional about it. You almost want to be cold and precise, just because it allows you to maintain control and then get out of there. And you have to realize that getting out is the main objective of self-defense, not to finish them. Okay. So the other thing when it comes to the legality of it is how you react. Okay. So if they push you and you start pushing them and you're escalating each other, like I was talking about before, then it's kind of both of your faults. Okay. You know, it's no longer self-defense. It is basically a fight. If you agree to this fight, if they, you know, start putting their guard up and things like that, and you're like, right, come on then, and you start shuffling towards each other and you start throwing all these punches and things like that, okay, you have basically both agreed to fight. You know, you might as well have a ref there saying round one. Okay, that's essentially how it goes. You know, if you've got witnesses, if you've got CCTV of people seeing that, then, you know, if it goes to court, it's not going to work in your favor. You can't claim self-defense, not really. You know, not unless they, you know, happen to then grab a glass or a knife or something along those lines. They start, you know, with that intent to kill, and then you take them down or something along those lines. But it's hard to get away from that because the origins of that situation, both of your fault. Whereas if they're coming onto you, they're starting and you're keeping your distance, you know, look, don't want any trouble, back off, mate, you know, I don't want this, then they're going to look far more favorably. You know, the witnesses think here, well, they clearly said that they don't want a problem, they don't want to fight, they reacted in self-defense, you know, and even if it was a preemptive strike, let's say, you know, they're doing the whole big chest thing, egging you on, and they're coming too close. Let's say they get too close to your hand and you just throw a jab and then back up. You know, you've hit them, they've taken it, they've sort of gone into shock, and then you've legged it. If it happened to then go to court, people would say, actually, it was a preemptive strike. It didn't cause him significant harm. It didn't, you know, permanently injure them. They're going to heal from it very easily. It just gave them a bit of a tap, a bit of a shock. It stunned them, and that allowed you to escape. It diffused the situation almost instantly because you could escape. Things like that, they would say, okay, these witnesses have said that's exactly what's happened. The CCTV shows that this guy was egging you on, came way too close. You created this distance again, and then as soon as they came too close, bang, okay? So it's all about how you present yourself. I've heard stories before about how people will be outside of a club or something along those lines, bouncers, and they'll have guys, you know, in a headlock or whatever now, and they'll be hitting them, and they'll say to them, you know, stop hitting me, stop hitting me, stop hitting me. And witnesses will even say, hey, he didn't stop hitting him. So the guy just, the bouncer kept hitting the guy, even if the guy underneath isn't hitting him. So witnesses can misinterpret things as well, interpret these situations as well. And you can twist it ever so slightly by doing those things. If you're hitting them, say, stop hitting me, back off, that kind of thing, while you're laying into them. Witnesses are going to perceive that as you're the one defending yourself more than you hitting them while you're obviously taking them down. It again just helps you. It's not trying to manipulate the system to make yourself be perceived like you are using self-defense, which you should be. We're not looking for fights up. So again, CCTV, witnesses, important things. You want to be sort of in sight of that. Obviously, you don't have to look around that much, or go out of your way to find witnesses. That's the police's job. But if you can, then that's always handy as well. So next subject I want to talk about, we're going to talk about some myths and misunderstandings when it comes to self-defense. Now, I've already talked about this with the likes of Hollywood, because let's face it, the media does misinterpret things. You see a lot of these martial art films and you think, oh yeah, you can be untouched, you can handle these groups as soon as you learn a martial art. A black belt is the ultimate level of badassery. And no, not really at all. It's actually quite low. A black belt is not the peak, okay? That shows a basic level of understanding, not that you can, do the whole Neo thing where you basically defend yourself with one hand, or, do spinning flying kicks and this, that, and the other, okay? Again, it doesn't work that way. You can't think that way because it's not real, okay? And sometimes you see these footages online and actually it's just been choreographed. So I tend to watch a lot of CCTV of like shops. This is usually in America and things like that, but sometimes you get them in the UK, and you get to see how people actually react in fights, and it's very different to how it's portrayed in TV and in cinema. That's because fights in the cinema on TV, they have to be organized, okay, because they have to be choreographed. Otherwise, the filmography is going to be terrible. Okay, I used to study drama, and the key thing that they always said to us was, if you're going to create conflict, do not do a fight scene on stage because it will look a mess. Okay, unless you choreograph it very precisely, which most people couldn't, because let's face it, they have no idea what they're doing in terms of combat. So it was either very minimal, like whacking them in a headlock or whatever, and then releasing them or something along those lines. But there was no proper like fight scenes like you see in modern sort of filmmaking, really. They want these things to look good. They want the hero or the villain to look threatening. They want them to look like they're a complete badass, But I can promise you, the likes of all of these famous martial artists and action heroes and whatnot, they would not be able to handle themselves the same way in the street. One's fiction, one's reality. Like I said, anything can happen in a fight. They could be taken down easily. You have 10 men against Bruce Lee. I don't care how good he is. He's still going to get hit. It's just the reality of things. And the sooner you realize that, the better. Because this is where the whole aesthetic versus practical self-defense comes in. Because you see these people doing like spinning kicks and kicking a guy in the head while he stands there doing absolutely nothing. This doesn't think about this kick flying towards him and ducks or moves back out of the way. No, he's just got this spinning kick flying towards his head. You've got people doing flying kicks and throwing their kick out at them, and then they go flying through walls and stuff. If it's made into a film, it's not real. It's fiction. The techniques they use might work within that fictional universe, and sometimes they can be somewhat realistic and techniques that you can actually use. And obviously, they're based on real martial arts, but it doesn't really work normally. Okay, you've really got to go out of your way. And this is where the aesthetic techniques come in. Things like, pressure points or, these great big locks. They don't always work. They're too aesthetically pleasing and they look really cool. So for cinema, perfect. But when you're thinking about practical self-defense, you want things that are quick, effective. You want to get them down to the ground as soon as possible, because the longer it goes, the more fatigued you're going to get. And this is the next thing I want to come into. You have these half-an-hour action sequences where they're fighting, hundreds of people. That's unrealistic. You know, when we get into a situation, the adrenaline kicks in. You know, fight or flight, whether we're running or whether we're fighting, you will run out of energy very quickly. The idea of adrenaline is that we're storing, you know, we're using our energy sources as quickly as possible to be able to be powerful, to be able to escape, so that we can run faster, so we can fight harder. But the thing is, that doesn't last very long, and you will be exhausted afterwards. You know, you think of any situation where you've been extremely nervous or you've had a confrontation, how much your heart is beating, how fast it's all going. And then afterwards, you feel, that was exhausting, you're out of breath. Okay, this is why you need to, one, be fit, but also, you know, you need to be getting out of there as soon as possible, because once you tire, you're going to be far more vulnerable. And if there's a group of people, you tire yourself out on one person, it's going to be a lot harder to fight the second one. And again, this is where, you know, we then move on to the whole fitness side of it. You know, you hear a lot of people saying, if you're a true martial artist and you really know your techniques, you do not need to be physically fit, as they stand there, black belt, with their stomach like this, sort of, you know. We've all seen them, okay? It's almost a rule, like, you know, you get to the, you know, the middle-aged black belts have to have a huge gut and things like that. It's quite a comical joke in the martial arts community. And that's, you know, sometimes the way it goes. That's because they don't really want to feel inferior. But frankly, if you're unfit, you're not helping yourself, okay? The fitter you are, the better you can handle that adrenaline that we were just talking about. The more power you have, the harder your strikes are. You learn to use your glutes. You learn to use your core, all of the arm muscles, okay? You push through those punches. You drive into it, okay? You think about how these professional athletes train so they can maximize power, so they can stay fit till round after round. Why can't you do that? Okay, because at the end of the day, if it works for them, it will work for you. Okay, and you're more likely to be able to take a hit and carry on. You're also more likely to be able to do your 30 seconds to a minute of fighting to defend yourself and then run. Okay, because realistically, that's how long it's going to last. It's not going to be, you know, you're not fighting for, you know, 3/4 of an hour. It's going to be a case of you're fighting for about 30 seconds to a minute. Generally, you know, fights don't last any longer than that, maybe a minute at most. But after that, the adrenaline starts coming down and you'll find that your energy starts sapping greatly. Then that's when people start hugging each other and holding each other and they're wrestling on the floor, that kind of thing. So the main thing to take away from that is that fitness is incredibly important. You know, the faster you can get up on the floor, the faster you can get these attacks back and then launch them back out again. The faster, you know, the harder you can strike, you know, by using the whole body's strength and speed and power, you know, the better. So you need to be physically fit. If you're physically, you know, if unfit, I'm sorry, but you will not be able to defend yourself in the same way. It just doesn't happen. Okay, you are going to be far more vulnerable. And this is what people look for when they're trying to find a target. So if you know, I'm not saying you have to be big and bulky, okay? Believe me, I'm not, okay? Far from it. Never have and probably never will be. Because, you know, if you're just focusing on the aesthetics, it will slow you down generally. But there's nothing wrong with size if you're focusing on speed, strength, power, things like that. You know, you get these big athletes, they're quite large, you know, they're quite ripped, but they're incredibly powerful and fast. And that's the way that you want to be, okay? So when it comes down to training, you need to do it properly. So again, sticking with the whole myths and misunderstanding, a lot of people like to compare martial arts. They say, right, this is the best one, this is the worst one. And they'll do it for different things. Like, this is the best one for sport, this is the best one for self-defense, or, you know, you've got the ones in the middle. Now, it's generally considered that martial arts will have a particular focus. So some martial arts will focus more on the sports side. Some martial arts will focus more on the self-defense side. So, for example, you've got like boxing on one side. I have never done any boxing sessions where they focus purely on the self-defense or even touched on it. Whereas Krav Maga, for example, complete opposite, okay? That is purely a self-defense system. There is no sport within that at all. and probably a good thing as well, because some of the techniques can be quite brutal. Okay, but then you've got things in the middle that tend to do a little bit of both. Things like karate, for example, is traditionally more self-defense based, but also you've got the whole sporting side as well. And a lot of people don't realize that. So you've got those ones that float in the middle a little bit more, but it doesn't matter what of these, it's all relevant. And that's what people completely miss. Do what you enjoy. Okay. If you prefer Taekwondo over Judo, or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu over Krav Maga, or Muay Thai, boxing, whatever, it really doesn't matter. Okay. Your techniques are still useful. When you become proficient at it, you know, the biomechanics of the body are all exactly the same. Obviously, you want to dip here and there. You want to learn a variety of things. You want to learn how to handle being on the floor. You want to be able to handle grappling. You want to be able to strike. You want to be able to kick. Okay. You want to be able to do all of these things. So picking from all these different areas is the best way. And that's what mixed martial arts tend to do as well. Again, the only problem with that is that they don't focus on self-defense. That is purely sport. Okay. And obviously there is a transfer of skills here. So you start off learning more the sort of sport thing, because you learn to strike, you learn the basics, you get your fitness up, that kind of thing. But then you can start applying more the self-defense side. And that's where a lot of traditional martial arts come from as well. So yes, okay, you might be doing a more traditional martial art, but the self-defense techniques, sometimes they can be, yes, very absurd and too aesthetic and unrealistic. But then you adapt that, okay? I have to admit, a lot of the karate techniques that I've learned for self-defense are ineffective, and I almost refuse to teach a lot of them. And sometimes I still get into arguments with instructors about what works. But realistically, pulling from all these different areas helps. So when it comes to self-defense, I personally prefer to keep my distance. So I prefer to train in terms of strikes. Now, that might just be because I've had more of a background of karate and boxing and things like that. But that's how I prefer. I prefer to keep my distance where I can, use my legs to push them back, okay? Keep away, because I'm quite small. As soon as they grab me, they're probably going to be quite big. It's going to be harder for me to get out, okay? We do some grapples as well and things along those lines. So I focus on the strikes, and if they happen to get too close, then obviously you go into these grappling. But again, we don't want to go on the floor. That's the last place we want to be. So, things like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or Judo or whatever, where you both end up on the floor quite typically, I'm not as keen on personally, because if you're in a group, that's not going to help you, because you're dealing with one person with two hands. And quite often they've either got one hand free to be either able to hit you with, or, start, pulling you away or grappling with you or anything along those lines. Or you've got somebody else coming in and they're going to start kicking you on the floor, things like that. And that's the last thing you want. Whereas strikes, you're able to try and keep people away from you. Okay. But it is good to be able to have all of these skills in place. You do want to be able to handle people on the ground. You do want to be able to handle people and keep them away with strikes. You do want to be able to handle, being grappled. Okay, if you end up coming into a clinch, somebody's sort of grabbed you around the neck, they're doing the whole hugging thing, you're pushing forwards about, you're wrestling around, they're trying to pull you about. You want to be able to know how to get out of that. So all of these skills are important. Okay, and like I said, some martial arts focus on one thing, some martial arts focus on another, and your training will reflect that naturally. But you want to try and have a little bit of a mixture. So some people do one version of striking and then another sort of more grappling-based martial art. And that's not a bad thing to do, really. So we talked a bit about training here. So I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about that, because let's face it, not a lot of people train in martial arts. And it's sad, because this is one of the most important skills that you can learn. And in a way, I do believe that it's almost more important than, something like swimming. Going swimming is a choice. Yeah, I completely agree. People should learn. But swimming is optional. You don't have to go and swim. You don't have to go into a pool. You don't have to go to the sea. For most people, you have to really go out of your way to do that. Being attacked isn't a choice. You're better off learning, frankly, self-defense, or starting it, at least learning, to strike. There's nothing wrong with teaching children, you do the whole stranger danger stuff. But what about strikes? Somebody comes up from behind and picks them up. throwing elbows back and things along those lines. You can easily do that from a young age. You can teach them how to use their body to their advantage to, fend somebody off. It's not just the educational side, it's the physical side as well. We want our kids to be fit and healthy, and we teach them how to swim, and that's great. It's great for form of fitness, it's a great skill to develop, but why not self-defense? And this is where I hate that schools completely ignore this. They refuse to touch on the subject, but it's important. So I'll get a little bit sidetracked there, but essentially it comes down to, we want to learn self-defense, okay? And it's really easy to say, oh, that's never going to happen to me. Oh, that doesn't happen around here, and a lot of people, have said that, and, they've said that to me. Oh, I don't need to learn self-defense. I'm not worried about it. It's never going to happen to me. And I think the 20th of June proved that, unfortunately. I would love to be wrong about this, honestly. But things happen. Life is unpredictable. And it's not fairy tale. As much as we might want our children to believe that, I think it's important that they understand that actually things can go wrong and it doesn't always go our way. And that sometimes we have to make these important decisions to defend ourselves. You can't just take it all the time. So again, training, the more you do, the better at the end of the day, the more the merrier. So, doing a 10-week self-defense course, yes, great. That was great fun. Now I feel like I know self-defense. You don't. You should be learning it week in, week out. You should be practicing. You should be having at least 1 hour session every week, roughly. Obviously the more the merrier. If you're only doing a half an hour session once a week, better than nothing. But try, please, because you need these skills. And if you don't practice it, you won't be able to use it. And unfortunately, people don't realize that they need it until it is too late. It is one of these things that you need to be prepared for. It's like first aid. You learn it so that you can use it in a situation. Self-defense is exactly the same. You don't go, I've impaled my hand with a knife, while cooking. I need to learn first aid. Bit late, I'm afraid. You don't wait for somebody to grab you, pin you up against the wall, and then you go, I believe that I need to learn self-defense. Really doesn't work that way. You need to learn ahead of time, okay? Nobody's going to wait for you while you learn for self-defense and then come and attack you. You can't say, hang on, mate, I'm not quite ready for this. Can you come back in a year's time? Really doesn't work that way, okay? You need to be prepared, okay? It's incredibly important to be prepared, because at the end of the day, defending yourself is very unpredictable. We've already talked about the unpredictability of fighting. And there's so many different situations. I always get asked about, what can you do if somebody does this? What can you do if somebody does that? And it's okay. It depends, one, on how big they are, how small they are, their sizes, things like that, all the different things along those lines. It depends whether you can diffuse. It depends on, their stance, their position, what is vulnerable, how they're holding you. There's so many different factors, and you need to learn to be able to handle that. Okay, obviously you start off with the more basic techniques, you learn to strike, etc. And then you learn how you can start manipulating the body, and then how you can take advantage of that, this, that, and the other. It all takes time to learn. Okay, most martial arts, it takes about 5 years to get to black belt, and that's what we consider the learning of the basics. You've built the foundation, now we can start building upon that. 5 years, and that's for most people training once, maybe twice a week. That's him, because we need to know self-defense. And yeah, okay, you might be able to cut that time down a bit by really focusing that training purely on self-defense. I've had people training with me who can learn, and develop their skills far quicker by just doing the self-defense, rather than, learning the sports side and all the other namby-pamby bits and bobs, that aren't as crucial to learning, that physical confrontations part. At the end of the day, training is one of the most important things you can do, but you can't always go out. And, the whole virus situation has proved that. While we've been in lockdown, a lot of people have been struggling to train. We can't touch each other. We can't get close. And that's okay. We've got other things we could do. We can practice our footwork. We can practice moving around. We can shuffle about. We can do our shadow boxing, and we can move. Okay, we can practice our footwork. I'm doing that with clients. I've been focusing more on their feet and how they're moving. So now they're moving a lot quicker. They're able to retreat quicker. They can drive in quicker with their attacks. You know, they're getting more powerful in their legs and faster. So now that they can move around better, whereas before they could have been quite clunky, they could have been getting these strong attacks in, but they're not moving. They're not able to dart around. Okay, so things like that. There's always something to practice. You know, you can simulate, you know, what people are doing. You know, let's say somebody's grabbed you here, they're bringing an arm up. Okay, I'm thinking, right, they're doing that, so I'm going to block that, rotate here, I can headbutt, I can knee, you know, walk through those situations, especially if you've done them before. It's a lot easier, you know, or practice with somebody at home. You know, that's an easy one to do. You know, teach somebody self-defense. Okay, yeah, you might not be qualified, you know, but practice, you know, teach them something. It doesn't hurt, okay? Obviously, you want to try and introduce them to somebody who's actually qualified to teach it, who has the knowledge, who has the ability to be able to do this, but start. It's your way of using them as well, learning how the body works, learning how people react. And that's quite important because nobody reacts the same way. Everybody reacts differently to hits and pulls and, you know, different levels of tension in locks, that sort of thing. And you've got to learn to adapt to this. So I've already been talking for quite a while at this point. And as promised, I wanted to do a bit of a live Q&A. So if anybody does have any questions, by all means, please leave them in the live chat. But people have been sending me in some questions all week, so I am going to be going over those. So one of the first things that I was asked was, you know, why should I learn self-defense? And I think it's easily summarized in a quick quote. It is better to be a warrior in a garden than it is to be a gardener in a war. And I think that's extremely crucial when it comes to self-defense, because you are far better knowing how to defend yourself and not needing to use it than needing to defend yourself and not, you know, being able to. And that's exactly what that quote summarizes. You know, like I said, it's an important and very crucial life skill, and everybody should learn it before it's too late, okay? Not everybody's going to get attacked in their lifetime, but you need to know it. It's crucial, okay? Because at the end of the day, it's life and death. And I'm sorry, but other hobbies don't deal with that kind of thing, and they don't offer you the same, you know, thing. Yeah, you can enjoy yourself. By all means, you know, you should enjoy yourself. You know, you only live once, but at the same time, you know, you want to live that little bit longer. So you should learn self-defense. It is very important. It's an important life skill, you know, and bring the family, you know, encourage your kids to do it as well. Get them learning this sort of thing from a young age so they can stand up to bullies, so that, you know, if, God forbid, you know, somebody tries to grab them or anything along those lines, they can sort of do something. It's better than nothing, okay? At the end of the day, all those 5 steps that I was talking about, the 5 elements of self-defense, the better you are at all of them, the less likely you are to get severely hurt. Okay, so next question. So another thing I was asked is, what is your go-to defense? Now, like I touched on earlier, there is no one single defense that you can use for everything. And even in a specific situation, it's still, you know, awkward because everybody's different. Everybody attacks differently. Everybody defends differently. And some people prefer different techniques to others. But in a situation, I'll go over roughly, you know, what I generally do. Okay, so what I generally teach for people is the whole arms out. Okay, you've got them bent here. Okay, this is you creating your distance. If you lock them out, you can't punch from here. Your arms are already extended. Okay, that's not going to work. So from here, you can still push. You can still, you know, drive a punch up, or you can turn back here and you can defend yourself by blocking and rolling with the punches, that kind of thing. Okay, so one of the first things I teach people is the whole backing off, keeping the arms up. Look, don't want any trouble. Okay, If people attack, they're typically throwing a big swinging punch. Okay, not many people are going to come up to you and start doing a 1-2, you know. In those situations, okay, from here, it's quite useful to step in. Use your forearm to block and push into their arm. Stop it. Okay, meanwhile, you strike with your elbow either into the throat or into the face, depending on their height. Okay, so that one's quite an easy one. You come from here and then you just step in and drive straight through. Okay, you know, you can either bring the arm up or you can bring it up here. Okay, that's probably one of the first and easiest techniques that I teach people. And it's surprisingly effective. Okay, especially if they're quite close already. You know, if they're starting to touch your hands, that kind of thing, it's really easy to just step in that little bit, you know, and the elbow is incredibly solid. It's very powerful. Okay, you get your whole body into it and drive through. So it's quite an easy technique to do. Alternatively, you can use exactly the same thing. Use the heel of the hand and come up underneath the chin. So from there, you can block and push straight up underneath the chin. As you push underneath the chin, that tilts their head back and their body weight is going backwards. Okay, push it or walk through it and they will stumble back, giving you an opportunity to run. If they're incredibly violent or you need to take them down, then you can always walk with them and push them down towards the floor. Okay, again, don't know quite what's on the floor. They might bang their head. It could be quite lethal, this technique, but you can control it as well. You know, if you were to bring up and then secure the head, you could support them on the way down. You can take them down to the floor that little bit gentler. It does depend on the situation very much, but those are two very good ideas of how you can defend yourself in most situations. But again, we just don't know what's going to happen, how they're going to react to these things. But those are two quite basic techniques that I try to introduce to most people in self-defense. Obviously, you've got grabs, grapples, you know, clinches when they're, you know, grabbing onto you and they're pulling you in, things like that. You've got, you know, kicks where people usually just swing their legs up, or, you know, these sort of big flailing arms, that sort of thing. There's so many different attacks, let alone, you know, including weapons and things like that. So you've got to learn a bit of everything, really. But for most, learning to, you know, keep your distance and then react if they, you know, they throw their arm back and swing, because that's what most people do. They sort of swing it around, or they're really cautious. You see a lot of these videos where they're coming into the side, things like that. In that situation, you can just push into the knee. You know, you can stand head on and just kick down. You know, you kick down onto their knee, buckle their knee, and then leg it. Or they're vulnerable for you to then throw a punch over the top or getting close, something along those lines. You know, you could go to the knee and push them away, or go to the knee and then punch over the top, something along those lines. You know, there's options, but it all depends on how they're fighting and obviously, you know, your distancing as well. So following on from that, that next question is, what techniques can you use against somebody bigger than you? Now, usually you're not attacked by somebody smaller than you, okay? Maybe only if it's a Chihuahua, but usually when somebody attacks, then we're going to be significantly bigger than you, because they, you know, they can intimidate you, they feel stronger than you. And that might only just be a little bit, or it might be a lot. Either way, there's still options, okay? There's always something that you can do, whether you're standing on your knees, backing away and crouching down, or you're completely on the floor. There is always a defense, okay? So there's always something that you can do. Now, if somebody's a lot bigger than you, it's going to take a lot more effort to get them moving, okay? If they're very close, they're probably going to grab you. They're going to be stronger and they're going to be able to manipulate you that little bit more. So really you want to keep your distance. But if they're getting close, I do like a barge. Now, this is something that most people who teach self-defense don't teach. It's not a traditional martial art technique, really, and it's not really a modern martial art technique either, because it's not really used in modern sports and things like that. But it works really well. So if you happen to be really close to them, okay, let's say they're closing their distance, you could be defending here, okay, you can push into them with your shoulder. You get a lot of power off of that pushing of that back leg. You can really push into their body and shift them, okay? If you do it against somebody of the same size as you, they really move, trust me. You know, I've had people try it on me, even when I'm braced, and I still get pushed back. Okay, let alone when they're unprepared for it, you know, they're in more of a casual stance, or even if they're approaching here, you know, you're still going to push them And if they're really big and they only take a little stumble, you do exactly the same thing again. And they pick up even more momentum. The more you hit them and the more you push them back, the more momentum they're going to get. And, like they say, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. Alternatively, you've got the knees. Great place to attack. Okay, to the front if you want to break it. Be careful with that one. Or to the side or back. Okay, makes it very easy to buckle the knee, bring them down to level so that you can strike to the head if it's uncomfortable to reach. But if you're a little bit taller, you can always go for the throat. You just have to be careful with this because there's a lot of soft tissue here. Okay, it's easier to cause a lot of significant damage than it is to the head where you've got more protection because of the skull. So if you can reach up underneath the jaw, you can do that, or into the throat if need be. But like I said, you can do this whole thing and then maybe strike to the knee if you need to, things along those lines. Depends on their positioning. Okay, the next question is quite a comical one. I've been asked before, do you need to say that you know self-defense? And this is a complete myth. Okay, a lot of people say no. It says it's in the law you need to say and announce that you know self-defense. Far from it. Okay, if you say that you know self-defense, and that you're prepared to use it, then you're giving them an edge. It might be a case of, okay, right, yeah, fair enough. Here's a knife. You don't want that, okay? You don't want to make things harder for yourself. You want that element of surprise. Most people expect you to be submissive. They're just like, yeah, okay, whatever, don't want any problems. And they make themselves look small and, cowardly. What they don't expect is somebody to be like, yeah, okay, whatever, don't want trouble, whatever. And then you suddenly attack, or, they throw a punch and you fight back. They're expecting to beat down on you because they want to be the dominant one. And that's quite often what it is. It's, they just want to show dominance. They want to dominate over somebody. You're not giving them that opportunity. As soon as you fight back, especially if you hit first, they panic. They go into shock almost. They're not expecting it, and you want that element of surprise. Okay, especially if you're a small woman, you look a little bit more feeble. Okay, you want that element of surprise. What you don't want to do is admit that you know some kind of martial art or something along those lines. That's the last thing you want to do. Okay, and it's not even a legal requirement. Okay, anybody can defend themselves. You don't have to have a qualification or a license to defend yourself. Doesn't happen that way. It really doesn't. No, don't say it. Don't worry. Completely ignore that myth. It's complete rubbish. Okay, so the next one I have been asked quite recently. How do you do a Kamehameha? Unfortunately, we can't unless you happen to be Super Saiyan, However, if you do go on a long trip around the world learning several martial arts, you may eventually, after decades of experience, be able to do a Hadouken. Just one for the nerds out there, really. No, realistically, ignore your animes, again, ignore your fiction, okay? A lot of these things are complete rubbish. The old five-finger exploding heart technique, Kill Bill. The amount of times that people ask, is that actually a technique? No, of course not. It doesn't work. And who in their right mind is going to let you go boop, 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 boop? Think how long that takes to do, okay? No, it doesn't work, okay? It's complete rubbish, complete myth. It doesn't work, okay? So, I think that's just about all we've got time for now. I've been waffling on for the last hour. If you have made it this far, well done. I do applaud you for taking time out of your day to be able to watch this. But it will be here to be able to watch, whenever you need to. This is free, this is for a cause. I do want, not only people in the local area to understand self-defense, but just all over the world. We do need these skills. They are incredibly important. And I hope you have taken something away from this, because a lot of these steps, the 5 things we talked about, most of them are doable straight away. You can start improving the way you view the world. I'm not saying you have to walk around being paranoid all the time, But you think how aware people have suddenly become during the whole COVID-19 situation. They're like, no, you've got to stay 2 meters. You know, I've had people, you know, you've got the footsteps on the floor. I've been about an inch ahead with 1 foot. And the guys turn around and been like, no, back up. Can you move back, please? Completely forgetting that, you know, around the winding cues, that he's about half a meter to the person next to him as he's leaning up against the barrier. You know, but people have become so aware of the people around them now. This is amazing. And I want to try and encourage people to keep doing that, because as much as obviously that's quite a negative thing, you know, because of hygiene and virus and whatnot, it's brilliant that people have now become more aware of where people are and what they're doing. And that is perfect, because that's exactly what we should be doing. We shouldn't be, you know, allowing people to enter our bubble, if you like. You know, I always find it incredibly uncomfortable, because I know what, you know, I understand what people can do and how vulnerable we are. You know, it's so easy for humans to get hurt. Okay, we're very vulnerable, and far more vulnerable than people realize. So, like I said, hopefully you've taken something away from this today. I really do hope that it's, you know, an important life skill. I just can't keep saying it enough, really. I'm probably repeating myself quite a lot at this point. But I hope it doesn't fall on deaf ears, because, like I said, it's a life skill that's needed. And frankly, more than swimming, if you have to compare it to other life skills, you know, things like that. But everybody wants to send their kids swimming. Yeah, I could rant on. And of course, I agree. You know, I love to swim. It's an important thing that I do believe you do need to know, and it is a life skill. But frankly, I think you're far more likely to get attacked, unfortunately. And that it's just the world we live in. You know, I keep having a client say to me, you know, with the whole Brexit situation, and now there's, you know, the riots are coming, you know, this, that, and the other, business is going to bloom, blah, blah, blah. And I almost don't want that, because I don't want people to be in danger. And this is why I teach these things. So hopefully, you know, you've learned something today from these teachings. I haven't gone into very specific techniques, because that's really hard to learn online. You know, it's not ideal. I'm not in the ideal setting to be able to do that. But if anybody does want to obviously learn any of these skills, I do have some tutorials that are set out on my YouTube. Some of them are quite old, but hopefully I will be uploading very soon. I'm going to be trying to make more of an effort to progress, you know, these tutorials. I do post them regularly on my other social media channels. So if you want to find Empowering PT on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, Twitter I don't really use, but the Facebook and Instagram, you know, plastered with tutorials and workouts and things like that to help you to be that bit fitter, to be able to handle your martial arts better, and to be able to improve your self-defense. Okay, so if you want, by all means, please do follow, subscribe, and like those pages. And hopefully, you know, I'll meet you at some point, because I do, and when we can, I will be going on with some more self-defense classes and courses and whatnot as well. In the meantime, please do stay safe, and I hope to hear from you all very soon. If you do have any questions, by all means, please do send them to me, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can.